Welcome to the Collective Genius Podcast, the show for real estate investors who are looking to scale.
Welcome into the Collective Genius Podcast, the podcast for real estate investors that want to grow and scale your business. Welcome in. Good to see you again. My name is Leon Barnes. I am your host of this great show. Now for over a year, I think we're now into episode 100 plus, doing these twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. This is our Tuesday long form, and we bring in members from all across the country. Thank you for all of the kind words, the likes, the subscribes, the shares. We appreciate all of you that are listening on a weekly basis and all the downloads. And again, all the kind words. We continue to bring you new members on a weekly basis. And I've got a treat for you this week, as always, bringing in a member, this time from the great state of California. Please welcome in my friend and now yours, Mr. Dek Bake. Welcome in, Dek. How are you?
Hey, what's going on, Leon? I'm good. How are you?
Well, thank you. Good to see you as always. And I always tell our California members, if your taxes weren't so bad, I'd replace Florida with my residence would be California for sure. I'm sure I see the sun shining behind you, so I know it's beautiful there.
It is 13% for the sunshine tax. Hold the word. It's probably 75 outside, you know.
Yeah, I tell you, most of the California investors I know are just, the taxes there motivates you guys to keep crushing, and you're another one of those that you do really well in a state that is super competitive. And let's talk about that. Let's start with this: where you're based, where you do your business, and the type of deals that you do there in California.
So I'm currently in our headquarters in Irvine, and we do the majority of our business in LA County, Orange County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County. We do deals all the way up through Northern California and San Diego, but our primary markets are LA, OC, mostly the Southern California area.
Okay. And you've been doing this full-time in this space since 2020, over 2,500 deals. Is this a wholesaling operation? Are you doing a combination of things? Because when we first met, I know it was mostly wholesale.
Yeah, it's all acquisitions and wholesale.
Okay. And all in that particular area. I know we've talked about this. I've seen this on your application when you first applied a few years back, that you were looking at expansion, but as of right now, it's California. Any plans on moving outside of California in the future?
Yeah, eventually, if the right opportunity presents itself. We're certainly not in a rush. The market's big enough out here for us to, grow and be a multi-billion-dollar corporation just in California alone,
Right.
But I'm not going to pass by any opportunities.
Of course. All right. So a couple hundred deals a year, as many as 500 in a year. We've got a lot to share there with the audience on how you were able to grow that. But for those that have listened to this show now for over a year and loyal to it, you know that I love to find out what people do, but I also love to find out how they got to that point. So Dek has a unique background. We do have a lot of former athletes that are in this space, but very few have gotten to the top at the professional level. And Dek is one of those that did. So Dek, when you were at Texas Tech, your alma mater, what is it that you wanted to do when you were in school playing football there? What is it that you said, when I'm done with football, I want to do this? Did you know?
Well, I didn't have that realization until after my professional career was over.
Really? You did not know had no clue what you were going to do. You just knew at the time football.
Yeah, I got my degree in human sciences with a minor in psychology. So I guess I was going to be a school counselor or something. I'm not entirely clear that, but I've never been one for backup plans, or plan Bs or contingencies. I just went all in, and I thought that I was going to retire, from a long NFL career, and that was my plan until it obviously wasn't.
Well, there's two things there. Is number one, the people that have that no, this is what I'm going to do. I always think of the quote that Eddie Murphy, says, and you never had a backup. People would say, if comedy and acting doesn't work out, what are you going to do? And he goes, nothing, because I am not going to let myself do anything other than that. And that's a little bit easier than when it comes to, professional sport, because obviously there's injuries that are involved and things of that nature that come into play. But you clearly had a path. You knew where you were going, and were able to get to that part. When you were at Texas Tech, you knew you were going to get an opportunity to play professional football, correct? You just knew it in your mind.
No, I mean,
Okay.
it's so competitive. I was an undrafted free agent, so I've tended to take the long journey and the hard path to get to most places that I got to go to. And getting to Texas Tech, I was a junior college transfer, so I didn't have any offers out of high school. I had to go get my associate's degree and prove myself at Fresno City College. And then from there, I got recruited by Coach Leach to go out to Lubbock, Texas and play there. So I always wanted to. I knew that I had the passion, the ability, but it's all about opportunity. There was one point where one of my defensive coordinators had mentioned that, I have the NFL potential, and they ended up broadcasting that during one of our bowl games. And I remember, as a 19, 20-year-old kid, just watching that over and over on CBS, just almost obsessing about it. Someone said I could do it. I thought I was the only crazy one,
Well, good.
But yeah.
That was motivation, I'm sure. It's especially hear from someone that was your coach, to be able to hear that from them. That I'm sure that added some fuel there. Now, this is not going to be a lot of people that listen to this, but I have to know, because I was a huge fan of Mike Leach, the coach that you referenced that recruited you to Texas Tech. And so indulge me here. Mike is, one of my favorite when it comes to especially quotes. He was as quotable of any coach at any level of all time before he passed. Do you have a favorite Mike Leach story?
I mean, there are a lot of Mike Leach stories. At the time, being a defensive player, I didn't understand it the same. His babies were the quarterback and the offense, but he did. He flew out to Fresno. He recruited me, took me out to McDonald's, and I was expecting at least like Chili's or TGI Fridays, something. But, the thing about Leach, man, is he was just unapologetic. He was a disruptor. He had a vision and he executed, and he didn't care what other people thought, and he was ahead of his time. The air raid offense and the things that we were doing back then, people would laugh at us. They didn't understand it. They didn't get it. And it's funny to see, now 15 years later, 20 years later, that's the standard in the NFL and in college. So it's pretty cool to see that. But I mean, he was wild, man. I mean, he had high expectations. You had to play hard. If you didn't, you were going to get punished, and he didn't like to lose. He hated to lose. He was wildly competitive. And yeah, again, he didn't care. He was a lawyer from Pepperdine.
Right. Super smart, obviously. And he was actually an active attorney before he went back into coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely a disruptor, and that is a good follow up here would be, and we'll get to your career here from a real estate perspective, but do you feel like you use some of that today from Mike Leach of disrupting the industry to have success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of parallels, in acquisitions and wholesale and the off-market private exclusive. There's a lot of controversy around that, and a lot of the old legacy realtors and professionals, they don't understand it, so it feels very similar. They don't understand our business. It's different, right? So people are always going to question different, but absolutely.
Never knew that about you. I knew you played for Coach Leach, but that makes total sense. Hearing you say that out loud, I could see some of your success would be directly from that influence that, Mike Leach. I mean, no one, prior to recently when, Texas Tech it's got a few billionaires that are, or at least one in particular that is funneling money into that program. But when I was a kid growing up, in the 80s and the 90s, Texas Tech, West Texas wasn't a place that you either were going to Texas, in the 80s, you were going to SMU for other reasons, but you didn't go out to West Texas. And he turned that into a place that people wanted to go to, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So clearly a disruptor, and something that you could take into your business, which you have. To finish this part of your life up on the football side, you end up being a free agent. You go to the New York Giants, who obviously are really good at this time, because I could be wrong, but don't you have a Super Bowl ring?
We won the Super Bowl there.
Yeah. I mean, so you go to tell me about that process real quick, because I think this is relatable to those that are listening to this as entrepreneurs. You go to a very good team as a free agent. You don't get drafted. So, the percentage of, the likelihood of the odds of you making that team are really slim, but yet you make the team. Talk to me about that experience. What was that like?
That journey was a wild one for sure. Like I said, I didn't have any backup plans, and I took the hard path there. I didn't get drafted. I didn't even get signed immediately after the draft. So before I went to New York, I went and did a tryout with the Washington Redskins and didn't make it. And then I came back, and luckily my agent was able to get me a tryout with the New York Giants, which was basically the last tryout. They brought in, I think, 60 or 70 players for a mini camp. And just by the grace of God, man, I played the best football I'd ever played. I was just on, and out of, I think, 60 or 70 people, they signed 2 of us. And that was just to be able to make it into training camp. Playing for Tom Coughlin was definitely a unique experience, and this was before the Giants were good. This was when his back was against the wall. Eli's back was against the wall. They hadn't won any championships. They hadn't had a ton of success. And so there was a lot of pressure there. But playing and going through training camp with Coach Coughlin, I mean, I think he had the most two-a-days in all of the NFL teams. I mean, it was hardcore. His attention to detail and just meticulous nature was a good experience. I mean, he had the Lombardi rule. If you weren't 5 minutes early, you were late. If you were late, you're fined $10,000, right? If you're at the wrong place, you're fined $5,000. And as an undrafted free agent, I didn't have that kind of money. So I believe I was in there 15, 20 minutes early, ready to go. But it was a cool experience, man, just to be around those guys, the Strahans, the Justin Tucks, the OCM Juniors, just the true professionals. It was a cool experience.
Yeah, those 3 guys you just mentioned on defensive line make up one of the best defensive lines I can ever remember, and gave Tom Brady a few fits and a few Super Bowls. I do definitely remember those 3 names for sure. So being around that level of talent, what does that do for you as you enter into the business world when you've seen people at the highest level, that like a Michael Strahan?
It taught me how to be a professional, and how to show up and get your work done and eliminate a lot of the distractions. It also kind of taught me, this way of life that is achievable, being able to experience the lifestyle of a Strahan or a Tuck, or, the things they had, the places they lived, the lifestyle they had, it was motivating, and it was something that I was so close to, and so it was something that I've always wanted.
One lesson, or if you have more than one, that you learn from Coughlin, because he is one of the last real old school type of coaches. I think of Marty Schottenheimer when it comes to two-a-days and players complaining about being overcoached and having to be early. If you're not early, you're late. But Coughlin was one of those guys, and hadn't won anything. I mean, did really well with Jacksonville before he got to New York, but just never had gone to a Super Bowl, never won a Super Bowl. Ends up winning 2 and becomes a Hall of Fame level coach. There's got to be something that you took away from your experience with him that you still use to this day, similar to what we were talking about with Mike Leach earlier.
Yeah, I think his was really just with the discipline and the mental preparation. I remember one day I came out, and O.C. Munor was a very athletic defensive end. He had all of these moves, and he wore these low-cut, ankle cleats, which is D lineman. We always wore the high tops,
Right.
and we were sponsored, I think it was Reebok at the time, so I had some kind of clunky Reebok cleats. And I remember going out one day, and I pulled out my combine cleats, which were some low-cut Nikes, because I was going to be like OC today. I was going to be able to get some moves. She had the little shoes on. I was going to wear the little shoes, and they were red and white. They weren't the exact team color, and I went out there, and I remember Antonio Pierce came up to me, and he was like, "Hey, man, you better go get spatted or get those cleats changed, because Coughlin will flip out if he sees you're wearing different cleats from the rest of the team." And I just were like panicking. There wasn't enough time for me to get back into the locker and change. So luckily there was a trainer that was able to spat me real quick. But like looking back on that, like even those guys, the biggest names that were making more money than Tom Coughlin, they still knew that they had to do the same thing as everybody else. From an undrafted free agent to the superstar, we all look the same.
That's culture, man. We always talk about in business, whether you think you have a culture or not, you have a culture. You may not set the culture, but you have a culture. And Tom clearly, Antonio Pierce was, on those teams, was a leader, eventually becomes a head coach in the NFL. So clearly, he's a veteran and he understands the rules. And, we talk about this in coaching a lot, and in business as well, as if your top level players understand and get the coach, and that's where your culture is built, is they understand the things that they have to do at a high level and make sure that everybody else falls in line. And for those that are listening that are not football savvy, especially when it comes to their cleats, when he was talking about spatting there, he wasn't talking about things that come out of your mouth, little droplets of water. He was actually talking about, this is a unique thing that if you're not in football, you don't know, where football players actually tape their ankles outside of their shoes, and it keeps from, rolling ankles. That doesn't happen in basketball. You always do it under the shoe, but it's a unique I don't even know where that comes from, Deke. From my years in arena football, it was always a thing, we got to spat up, we got to spat up. And even when I played football in high school, spat up. I don't know where that comes from. You know where that
No, that's the point. I just threw it out there like everybody would know what it meant. But I don't know where it came from.
When you said it, I was like, man, some people are going to be listening to this thinking that Antonio Pierce and OC and those guys are spitting on you. But yeah, it's a unique thing that's only in football. Maybe they do that in soccer.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But
I just remember it being the first time I remember it becoming an issue is when, this is where business comes in with sports, is in the NFL and other leagues, specifically football, shoe companies were afraid to sponsor shoe, become the league sponsors, Reebok and Nike, now Nike with the NFL, because football players would spat and have tape on the outside of their shoes, so they would cover up the logos. And I know that especially was a big deal when I worked in the Arena Football League. That was a big deal because they were like, hey, you guys, I can't be a shoe sponsor because you guys spat up over that. Now, since then, the shoe company's gotten smart, and that's why you see the logos on the front of the shoe and the bottom of the shoe and the side of the shoe. But, that's, again, where business comes in. You're trying to sell the sponsorship, but you're covering up the goods, the billboard, which is the actual logo of the shoe. So I wanted to get that out there because to make sure that people understood it, but also there is a business reason that it can always come back to business and always comes back to money. All right, so you win a Super Bowl ring there. You hit the pinnacle of what you always wanted to do, and they say the NFL stands for not for long for a reason, or the NFL stands for that because the average player, and I know this from my arena football days, is less than just under 3 years. And that's really right around the time that you get enough, games for pension and things of that nature. And if they can find someone cheaper, they're going to find someone cheaper and bring them in. So at what point does this career end and you figure out real estate is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I ended up getting hurt. I had a fracture in my L5 in my back, so I was placed on IR. And I think it was a day or two after the Super Bowl, they flew me out to New York. It's funny because they flew me from Texas to New York when they signed me, first class. First time I'd ever been on first class. Awesome experience. They flew me back, coach, maybe even Spirit Airlines, and they cut me, and it was over. And my world was kind of flipped upside down. I ended up rehabbing, getting healthy. I signed with the CFL, went and did a year up in the Canadian Football League, was trying to get back into the NFL, and ended up breaking and dislocating my foot up there. And I was sitting, in a freezing little apartment in Regina, Saskatchewan, not even playing, not making much money. And that's when I realized that it's time to move on with my life and figure out my next chapter.
Did you have a clue?
I did not. No, I didn't. And it took me a while. I thought maybe I was going to get into coaching. I thought maybe, it was tough, man. I had no idea. I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I wanted to make a lot of money, provide for my family. But I had no idea. And luckily, I had a mentor at the time, a guy named Mickey Tyner, who was out in Houston, Texas. He was a good old boy, man, just a great human being, hard worker. He had bought a Texas barge and boat, a company down in Freeport, Texas in the 80s for like $150,000. And at the time, it was worth almost $200 million. And I'll never forget having a conversation with him. I was like, Mickey, what should I do? I want to be successful. I want to be able to provide for my mom, my sister, be able to have the life that I think that I deserve. And I'll never forget it, man. He said, Deke, if I had to make my fortune again, I would do it in real estate. And that's all it took, man, is I went and signed up for my real estate course, in classes the next day, probably had my license within, 3 to 4 weeks. And that's what set me on that real estate journey.
So again, you're down this path of this is it. Football is it. Now real estate's it, but not understanding what the journey looked like after getting a license.
Yeah, I was lost again, man. I had no idea what type of real estate I was going to do. All the advisors and people that I spoke with from my undergrad, they were telling me to get into commercial real estate, so that was the original path that I was trying to get. And I ended up, getting a couple of offers, doing some interviews, and it was a small salary with the opportunity to earn a commission after like 2 or 3 years, and I just couldn't see myself being that patient at that stage of my life, and I explored the traditional real estate, and I just knew right off the bat that wasn't going to be a good fit for me. Dealing with the owner occupants, the retails, it didn't feel right. I explored property management, man. I almost got duped into some of those back of the classroom seminars, give us 20 grand and we'll teach you how to flip houses. And luckily, again, kind of just on the right place at the right time, I responded to an ad on Craigslist and ended up linking up with, now the largest wholesaler in the nation. But when they were a startup out in Dallas, Texas, and I was one of the first people that they hired. I just fell in love with the business and the model and acquisitions and wholesale, and haven't looked back. It's been almost 18 years now.
Was that an opportunity to work for someone else and learn the ropes to get to where you are today?
I didn't know where it was going to take me. At the time, I was just trying to make money and pay my bills. Out through the interview, I remember walking through the teeny little sales pit, and they pointed over at one of the sales guys, and they're like, that guy makes 10 grand a month. I looked, kind of sized him up a little bit. That guy? All right, well, then I'll take the job.
I've been there, my friend. Like you, I wasn't patient enough to continue my broadcasting career in sports, to get to the NFL and other things. I just wasn't patient enough, and I knew that it was going to take me way too long to get there. And so I, like you, asked people, what could I do immediately? And they're like, you would be perfect in sales. You'd make a lot of money. And I started in advertising sales. And the first day I walked out of training, they put me in a room and they said, that guy right there makes 6 figures. That guy right there makes 6 figures. And everybody that I saw at the time, and it wasn't an ego thing. It was just like, if that person is making 6 figures or 10 grand a month or 20 grand a month or whatever they were making, we had people making $500,000 a year. And I'm like, my goodness, I am going to crush in doing this. So having that confidence of starting something new, knowing that there's a successful equation that is, if you just do these things, I promise you'll be successful. That's great especially for athletes, people that have been through Goodness, I say this about athletes. I say this about military. If you've been through a disciplined process of success, it will translate in real estate, in sales, generally, because whatever you're doing from the business side, you've done so much more of putting your body through, all the practices and all the training and all of the rooms that you have to go into get injuries taken. I mean, just all the things that you put up with. If you just apply that to business, half of that, you're going to be successful. So clearly that worked out. You ended up staying there for a while before you go out on your own. How long did you stay with this company?
It
And
was 12 or 13 years. Yeah, it was a long time.
that is a long time. I mean, at halfway through this, 10 years into this, you said, why am I not doing this on my own? What was that process?
No, I don't think it was that. I mean, I always knew that I wanted to maximize my ability and climb to the top of whatever organization I was in. And I was climbing. I had a lot of success with those guys. I learned a ton. It was a great experience, and I mean, I'd say I certainly was on the path to get to the very top. There's no question about that. Really, I think what sped everything up was COVID. COVID hit, in 2020, and out in California, the world shut down.
No doubt.
Very real thing, and our pending board and active deals fell to zero. We were all on lockdown, and I just really leaned into the phrase of never waste a crisis. I didn't. I knew we were going to have to rebuild and start from scratch anyways. So might as well take that chance and bet on myself and see what I could do myself. And that's when I made the decision to launch Fair Trade.
So you have Fair Trade that you launch. What does that look like? I mean, you're 12 years in the business. You're now just going out on your own for the very first time. You're starting from zero. Do you have employees? I mean, you know what to do, but you haven't done it on your own before. What's that initial first 6 months look like?
Well, I think the first 6 months are like excitement. You're kind of really like riding that high, almost that honeymoon stage.
Mhm.
Then the reality starts to set in of how hard it actually is to build a successful business. But at the beginning, it was still full blown lockdown for the first few months. So we were working from home, meeting different people's home offices, breaking every COVID protocol, that we needed to get to where we had to be. First office was like a mixed use office / residential space in Santa Ana, and, just like so many entrepreneurs and business owners, learning the hard way, learning through mistakes and failures, as you figure things out. But, yeah, it was fun. Looking back now, 6 years later, you appreciate those times.
I mean, clearly you did something right. I mean, within, a few years' time, I think by 2024, you were up to 500 transactions a year. Clearly you were doing something right. Where did you have the most success early? After we get past a lot of the COVID stuff, where do you feel like you had the most success early on?
Well, I think a lot of it was the market too. The market took off and it was unexplainable, and we were just riding that wave for a while until, the tide started to lower right at the end of 2024, and 2025 was pretty challenging out here, but I mean, the market was on fire. We could sell anything to anyone.
But that doesn't mean that, you are in a very competitive area. You could sell anything, but you had to acquire it. So your acquisitions piece of it had to be locked in.
Yeah, I mean, acquisitions has always been the most challenging part of our business, especially in California. It's incredibly competitive, like you said. I mean, every realtor, flipper, wholesaler, investor is our competitor, and we're all fighting for the same products. So, yeah, I mean, we certainly had some talented agents and we really leaned in on what was working, because as a startup, you don't have a big marketing budget, a lot of resources to spend to generate those leads. So a lot of it was referrals, relationships, agent contacts, wholesaler contacts, kind of the guerrilla marketing from text blasts, email blasts, whatever we could do, and tried to do it all.
Fast forward to today. Um, I'd love to pick your brain on a couple different things, including your time with the Collective Genius and being around other like-minded individuals. But before I get there, what right now in today's market, 2026, as we sit here, what do you feel like is working best for you and your team?
We have a really good culture this year. We went through some turbulence over the past couple of years and had to get some toxic, people out of the organization. And I'm very confident in just the high character A players that we have right now. So that's probably what I'm the most excited about. Um, Whenever we start to get a little bit of momentum, and the investors start to get a little bit more confident, it seems like something externally continues to happen to scare people, So we're not completely out of the woods, but it certainly feels like the market is starting to pick up a lot more than last year.
So has it been a year now that you've been in CG?
Yeah, this is my second year.
Yeah, year two. I know that from the very first time that we talked, you had numbers to be in a higher level, but you were like, I need to be in a room and humble enough to know that I don't know what I don't know and know that I can help people. But at the same time, I have some things that I really want to work on, and be around other people just to be in a room with people that are like-minded to continue to grow and accomplish our goals. In your first year, some of the takeaways that you've had from being in a room like CG.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect at first, because you see a lot of the members and some of the biggest players in the United States, and I wasn't sure how big those egos were going to be or how open with sharing those folks were going to be, because in so many different sense, they're all direct competition with each other. But I was shocked, man. Your guys' go-giver attitude really does kind of set the stage for the culture, and people are totally willing to share, and being able to meet those people and just pick their brain. I always leave those conferences feeling small, which I like, which is healthy.
That's
And,
really good.
the first few, I remember always coming back with just a crazy, amount of things that I wanted to implement into the business, and yeah, it's been good, man. I'd say the connection piece is really valuable. And you guys have had some awesome speakers too.
The one thing that you've implemented, Deke, that can you think of one thing that's had the biggest impact?
Um, I think trying to bring that go-giver attitude and mentality into our organization and at the different kickoffs and events and boot camps that we do, to get our agents to open up and express themselves and share freely and comfortably the same way that you guys do.
Any relationships in particular where you've like, all right, this is somebody that I have met that is very like-minded that has now become, a friend, mentor, or someone I can always reach out to?
It's really starting to get, I think I'm on like my fifth or sixth event. The first few, it's like the first time you're meeting them, right? The second time, start to know them, recognize them again. The first, third, fourth, you really start to, develop some good relationships with people, So I'd say a lot of them, man. I've really enjoyed it. I enjoy those events a lot.
I'm glad you said that. A lot of people come in the first meeting and they expect to, walk out with, a bunch of new friends and deep relationships. And it generally takes up to 3 to 4 meetings before you start to see that same person now over, at the same meeting, in the same room with them, start to develop relationships, start to see where the businesses are similar, where you can help them and maybe they can help you. I'm glad you mentioned that because it does take some time. But once you're there 3 to 4 meetings in a row, you start to make some deep relationships where anytime you have something, in your business, or it's heck, sometimes personally, just family, as we were talking about pre-show. It's amazing the conversations that you can have with individuals, because these are people that are, have the same type of goals that anyone that's listening to this, if you're listening to this, it's because you want to be the best in your industry. And that's everybody in the room, and not just industry, the best at everything that you do. Um, the, this is always something that our members it's not always bigger, but it's always better for sure. What's next for you guys? What's the next piece of the business? What's the next quota, goal, agenda that you're after?
Well, we've learned the hard way that bigger isn't always better. Well, better is better. And we have the infrastructure and we have the systems and the team and everything in place to where if we need to grow and scale or expand, we certainly can. We have the ability to do that. But right now we're just focusing on being the best in our market, and that's in California, so, we want to get back to the numbers, pre-25 numbers where we're doing 500 plus deals a year. And, our goal is to be the largest home buyer in the state.
And from there, if you do get to, that goal, which you will, if you get to that goal, do you see this model being one that you can expand or want to expand?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it'll work in most major markets, so I've practiced in multiple markets. I think California, Southern California specifically, is one of the most competitive and challenging for businesses to be successful, so I know that we would be successful in other markets. It really just comes down to the people, man. The only way that I'm going to invest in an expansion is if it's by the right person. I'm not just going to grow or jump to a new market just because, I've made mistakes in the past from doing that. And it has to be the right character fit, someone that is aligned with our core values as an organization.
Yeah, you have to almost have another business owner, even if they're not a partner or a founder. You almost have to have another person that is at that same executive level to go and start that new market. And most times for the high level operators like yourself that I've worked with, most times it happens very organically. Someone, in your office in Los Angeles needs to move to Denver because, wife, needs to get there, be around family, someone's ill, something along those lines. I've seen that happen over the years, and it doesn't have to be forced. And you have that, like, you're very calculated. Like, is that where you like that? I can't see you like that as a football player when it comes to very calm, collected, and calculated. I don't see you like that as a football player. Are you the opposite of the way you were in your playing days?
I mean, I was a defensive lineman, a DN, a D tackle. So I was, your prototypical meathead, I would say calculated in the sense of preparation.
Sure.
And work ethic, and making sure that I was doing all the right things. I remember, just mimicking the best in the locker room at whatever it was they were doing. If it was something as stupid as their pregame meal to what they drank at halftime to the way they spatted their cleats, I would just mimic it until I eventually became that best. So I'd say to a certain degree, but I've learned so much through my real estate career. It's 18 years, multiple markets, battle tested in every sense that you can think of, and I'm at a position to where I can comfortably think, at that 20,000 to 30,000 foot level at all times and not get caught up in minutia in the day to day, which can so easily take over your mind and your schedule and, hold you hostage in a business, So, I appreciate that, though. That's a compliment, I think, unless my wife says it, and then it's probably a backhanded insult.
Right. Well, there's energy that people have at meetings like this where they're like, I've got to meet this person. I've got to meet that person. You kind of let things come to you. And that's, you're not an introvert. You're not an extrovert. You're just kind of naturally letting conversation come. And, you can tell that you're taking a lot of notes and you're going to use what works for you. And I think that's something that all too often people, their energy levels get super high and coming in this room, especially for the first time. And they're missing things because they're not listening, because they're trying to hit this agenda, this thing that they came for. And what they came for, usually, if they just, engage and listen, it's usually going to be solved not once, not twice, but it's probably going to be layered 3 different times in 3 different ways to accomplish the thing that they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good description of the way that I approach those. I don't know where I fall on the introvert extrovert, somewhere like I certainly get exhausted from some of those big networking events. And if I have to talk to, hundreds of people, it certainly wears down my energy. So I don't try to force things. There usually are people that I want to connect with and learn from, or at least shake their hand, the biggest operators in the space. And so I'm always able to do that. But yeah, I try to let it happen organically. That's, to me, where the best relationships and connections happen.
Agreed. You mentioned your team you're excited about in this year. Anything else that, from a business standpoint, personal, anything that you're super excited about here for the rest of 2026?
I'm excited for you guys coming out here to Oceanside in a couple of months. That's fun. Yeah. So
Our California folks love the California events, and we don't get any. I think it is number one by far of all the events, all the spaces that we've ever done events at. Oceanside is always number one.
Oh, it's great. I loved it. Yeah, it was a blast. It was really nice. Obviously, I'm a bit biased because I was able to drive an hour from my house in Huntington down there, but I'm looking forward to the next event for sure.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. I appreciate you opening up here today and taking the time to tell your story. If people are interested in following your company's journey, reaching out to you, what's the best way for them to follow you?
Probably on LinkedIn, I would say. It's easy to find me, Dek Bake or Fair Trade Real Estate. I'm sure I'm just a Google search away.
Yeah, and I'm sure that people will have questions about the spatting. You can answer those via your email or social media. Dek, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you here at our California event coming up as well. I appreciate your time and appreciate your story. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. You heard Dek talk about the event. You heard him talk about how he's been in now for over a year and how those relationships are now starting to really form, getting all of his questions answered, meeting the people that he wants to meet. And if you want to meet him and others at our next CG Premier event in June of 2026, it is in Oceanside. The best way to do that is get on our website, explorecg.com. There you'll find our application. All you need to do is fill out that application. You're a full-time real estate investor. More than likely, we have a tier for you for where you're at this given point. And you can be in the room with guys like Dek that are doing hundreds and hundreds of transactions and been in this business for 18 to 20 years and is calm and cool and collected that you can pick his brain and vice versa. So again, that's explorecg.com. Look forward to seeing you on the other side once we receive that application. Look forward to seeing you next week here on the Collective Genius Podcast.
New episodes every week. To learn more, visit explorecg.com, where real estate investors come to scale.